Morning, it's Christina here, and joining me now, someone who's no stranger to a radio studio, that's for sure. Gary Burgess, broadcast journalist, who's here to tell us all about you and about me, as you could put it, about ME as well, chronic fatigue syndrome. And I know it's something which has affected your life, hasn't it? Tell me, first of all, how are you today?
Morning, Christina.
Morning.
I'm okay. I'm a bit wobbly today. One of the many symptoms and characteristics of this little understood illness, disease thing is sort of a delayed response to doing something. So I was actually in this studio on Wednesday doing an interview for Radio 5 Live, and I expected to be thoroughly knackered afterwards. Actually, my brain was buzzing and I was actually full of unusual energy. And then it hit me 2 days later, Friday lunchtime. I was in the middle of a conversation and the words coming back just became noise and my legs were wobbly walking home. And today I'm okay. I've had a very gentle weekend. The most I've done is a stroll round the corner to sit down with a newspaper in a different location. And it's just nice to be sitting down and talking nice and calmly to a nice person. So thank you so much for doing that. That's really, it gets me out of the house.
There you go. Back into a studio again.
Well, this is a nice studio.
Here.
It's lovely. You know, I miss the TV studio, but in the meantime, if it's a radio studio, that's a real treat.
Now tell me a little bit about ME then.
Yeah.
And in terms of yourself as well, when were you diagnosed?
Yeah, ME is myalgic encephalomyelitis. Some people, and I emphasize some people, call it chronic fatigue syndrome. There is a significant number of people diagnosed with ME who really dislike the chronic fatigue syndrome label because syndrome just implies a series of symptoms rather than a definite thing. And also I think aids misunderstanding of what ME is. You know, years ago you'd hear that horrible phrase of yuppie flu or oh you're a bit tired. Well, ME is way beyond that. Fatigue is just a symptom, and by fatigue I don't mean tiredness. I mean a complete body sapping fatigue, an empty, hollow echo of a shell of yourself that some people have said is like the worst flu combined with the worst hangover. So there's that. And then you add in pain. I'm in quite a lot of pain in my body, particularly around my joints today, my wrists and my ankles. And it's when my ankles, my legs give way. It can be a bit embarrassing if I fall over in the street, which has happened before now. Thank goodness for the benches along the parade. That's all I can say. Then you add to that the brain fog, which is a confusion where you know, you sometimes have that word on the tip of your tongue and that word just won't come out. Well, that happens more often than you'd expect. There's a difficulty concentrating, losing my train of thought, as you may experience over the next 46 and a half minutes, I'm sure, Christina. And as well as that, I've forgotten what else.
You've done it already.
I'm losing my train of thought already.
Just to prove a point.
But yeah, brain fog, concentration. That was the other thing I was about to say. Things that sap your limited amount of energy are quite surprising. So for me, it can be walking into a busy room. So before I've even spoken to a bunch of people, I like to pop into the ITV newsroom to say hello to my colleagues. But actually, just walking in, the overwhelming sensation of a busy room can drain my battery. And the way I've described it many times now, and I think people seem to get it a bit more when I describe it like this. It's like an old mobile phone battery. When you've got an old mobile phone, there comes a point where even when you've charged it overnight, you switch it on in the morning, it tells you there's 100% battery. And then after sending just a couple of text messages, it goes down to 10%. It's nearly drained. And that's what my battery is like. So I have to really ration myself. And that's one of the hard bits, because in my head, I've not changed. I want to operate at 100 miles an hour. I want to be at work. I want to be doing the news. I want, and I can't.
So when did you notice this change? I mean, I've worked with you over the years
you
as
call
well.
It
and
work.
Well, but we enjoy it as well. Yeah. And just how you described it there is how I've known you
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
When did you first notice that that battery just wasn't charging as you'd
Sure.
want it to?
Well, for the last, some people may know, many years ago, back in 1999, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and I had the tumour removed, and I had 3 months of chemotherapy because the cancer had spread to my stomach, chest and lungs. And the chemotherapy worked, and they kept me on surveillance over the course of 10 years. And after 10 years, they sign you out because it doesn't come back after 10 years. However, there's a small band of people, and I'm one of them, for whom after 15 years, it came back and it returned to my lungs. So in 2015, I had part of one of my lungs removed. And then in 2016, I had part of one of my lungs and part of a lymph node between my heart and my windpipe removed. So that was August 2016. The 3 months after that, you expect to feel frazzled. So I was resting, recuperating, ready to come back to work. And I returned to work in November 2016. And things weren't right. And I was pushing on, and I now know one of the worst things you can do with this particular illness is push through. So all your instinct is to push through, isn't it? You know, we push through a cold, we push through flu, we push through getting better from an operation. Well, actually with ME, the opposite is true. And actually you are in fact self-harming by doing that. But I came back to work. December was hell. I mean, I was lying on the floor of the newsroom in between recording interviews and doing news reports just to be still and flat and relatively quiet. I was sweating profusely. My concentration and sharpness, but yeah, my sharpness had gone. Everything just felt dull and curvy rather than sharp and on it. And Christmas Day finally stopped. So that was 2 Christmases ago. And I was in bed by lunchtime, 2 in the afternoon. I was asleep. I lost my Christmas Day. I lost Boxing Day. I couldn't go to work between Christmas and New Year. I went back to work after New Year, and it was Thursday the 5th of January. I remember it very well. Thursday the 5th of January 2017, so just over a year ago. I was live on air on the ITV News in the studio, and I had an out-of-body experience in the middle of standing at the plasma TV screen doing a report about maternity and paternity allowances in Jersey. I was suddenly looking down on myself and on the presenters and on the studio camera crew. And it was a lovely experience, but not the sort of thing you should have happening to you at any point in life, never mind when you're live on the telly. And that was the point I realised it's time to stop. And I went to the doctor, who said, stop. And I mean, stop. And that was the last day I did a full day's work.
And at that point, how much were you putting all of that down to what you'd been through with the cancer treatment, etc.? Because that, as you say, was so much to go through. Did you think it was a result of that at that
Absolutely,
time?
I did, and everybody around me did, and my doctor did, and the oncologist did. So all the focus, and I think that's what took up a significant amount of time learning what the heck this is, was the presumption that it was linked to the cancer. Yet test after test came back that I am, quote unquote, probably in italics and inverted commas, a picture of health, because I'm not. But I had blood tests, CT scans, x-rays. Then they started going wider and wider. I had this thing called an insulin tolerance test, where you go into the hospital, they inject you with insulin to the point at which you're on the edge of falling unconscious, to see whether or not your pituitary gland in your head is working. So they thought, oh, maybe there's tumours growing on your pituitary gland. I had a brain scan, and everything came back again and again and again. The blood test, the 24-hour urine test, the stool samples, sorry to put you off your Sunday brunch, and everything was fine. And then 286 days later, finally, through a process of ruling out things, because there isn't one definitive test yet for this mystery that is ME, a puzzle wrapped in an enigma, and so on and so on and so on. They said, yeah, the working diagnosis is ME. And then a month later, last November, the endocrinologist said, yes, it is ME. It's time to treat it like that. So I was hoping for a medicine, a tablet, a sticking plaster. There is none. So the starting point for me was, in her words, kindness. Start being kind to yourself, which means rest. It means relaxation. It means letting go of the worry of being off work. Stop feeling guilty about not being able to go to work. All those instincts we have as human beings. try and let it go. The way I describe it now to other people is try and be like a non-stick frying pan. Be more Teflon. Let it all slide off you. And it's not easy, because there are many days when I feel terrible for not being at work. If I know the newsroom's having a busy day and they could do with an extra body in there, none of us is overstaffed in the media in Jersey, God forbid. And I cannot think like that, because it does me harm and stops me getting better.
Is there an end to this? I know you said now you've had your diagnosis, you've been given a name for how you're feeling, but not necessarily a treatment apart from taking it easy.
Yep.
Have you been given a possible end to it?
No, that's it. We all crave a label. I was craving a diagnosis. We all then crave a solution. So for my cancer first time round, the solution was the chemotherapy. The second and third time round was surgery. I'm a big fan of black and whites, of ons and offs, of switches. If there's something wrong and you can chop it out of me, feel free to cut my chest open and take it away. Thank you. That will do me nicely. This feels much more of an abstract concept, because the medicine, the science, is not there yet. Indeed, there is this horrible debate, which I suspect history will look back on as a scandal, where there are psychologists saying that ME is a psychological illness. It's in your mind. Well, actually, the overwhelming body of evidence says that is absolute tosh. I can't say any stronger words right now on the radio. Your eyes were widening in case I was about to say absolute tosh. It is a neurological, a physical condition. There's evidence of the energy making machines inside your cells failing. There's a lot of research happening around the world, but there's also this research debates happening between two vested interests that I think is frankly getting in the way of progress, which, as I say, I think is tragic, but I hope in the not too distant future they'll sort themselves out and get through the other side of it. And then the people who are known as the missing millions, an estimated 250,000 people in the British Isles, millions around the world, will be taken seriously, will get the treatment they deserve and need. I'm lucky. I'm able to sit here today awake, vaguely coherent, and have a wonderful conversation with you. I've been receiving messages by the hundreds, over 1,000 messages since last Wednesday when I went on the radio, from people all around the world who don't have a voice, who don't have an outlet, and who are stuck in bed in terribly dark, depressed, frustrated, angry situations, and you can understand why that's the case for them, but it is a scandal.
Well, you're listening to BBC Radio Jersey, and I'm speaking to TV journalist Gary Burgess about being diagnosed with ME, and also how it's affected your life as well. We'll be back to speak more in just a bit after some travel news. And right now, I've been chatting to TV journalist Gary Burgess, who's been telling us about his diagnosis with ME, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, and how it's been affecting his life as well. So we're also talking as well about, the response that you've had, because you were on BBC Radio 5 Live this week. Yeah. I know social media as well. You've done a lot on social media. You set up an online network as well. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it really came out of my own frustration and the need for an outlet. Writing I find really cathartic. And last October, when I received the working diagnosis of ME, I set up a blogging site. I wasn't sure what it was going to be for. I called it Zonked Club because there are times when I was describing it to a friend that I just felt zonked. I didn't know what it was, but I felt absolutely zonked out. So I set up, I called it Zonk Club, and I started describing my symptoms and describing just the things I was learning along the way. Really little simple things sometimes, like, and an example I've used a few times, each night when you do the washing up and you then put those 2 dinner plates away back in the cupboard, only to get the 2 dinner plates back out of the cupboard the next night when you're cooking dinner. Don't just leave them on the drainer. It sounds a little nothing, but if you start building up 100 little nothings in your day, they can add up to just a little bit more that I can get out of my battery to live, which is what I want to do. So I set that up, an overwhelming response, and then as a consequence of that, 5 Live, my wonderful colleagues at ITV News last week ran a feature as well to coincide with a screening of a documentary, which was Oscar nominated for the Oscar longlist. The documentary called Unrest by a lady in the United States who has been through her own awful ME experience. So I've been doing all of those things, and I think awareness breeds awareness breeds awareness. And yeah, hundreds and hundreds of messages. A couple of charities, Action for ME and the ME Association, have been in touch with me as well to see if there's anything we can do together to just help each other out and try and raise, it's a number of things, awareness and understanding of what ME is, and also I guess of what ME isn't. It isn't a bit tired. That is to misunderstand it. But also to raise awareness at sort of policy level that there is this lack of understanding of research, perhaps of investment as well, to try and find that breakthrough. So that's been wonderful. But also lots of stories of people just saying, thank you for describing what it is I've got. I think it's sometimes hard to put into words what ME really is. So I think some people have found that quite useful. And I've recorded a few videos and put them on YouTube as well. That it's interesting, isn't it? All this technology that's around us. I previously used to sort of squirt out the latest headlines of stories I was covering here in the islands of which politician had wound up with some awkward questions, all the things we like to do. But actually to now send out this stuff to help other people, and indeed to help me, because people are sending me so many things that they've learned, helpful diet suggestions, ways of getting through the day, tips for getting married. I'm getting married at the end of this month, and the duration of a wedding day is longer than any day I've been awake this last year, because I normally have a sleep in the afternoon. So advice for things like that. It's wonderful. It's making the best of a bad situation. As somebody described to me the other day, they said making your mess your message. I was like, I quite like that. If you're in a mess, use it to get a message out there. And if we can all help each other, whether that community is in Jersey, in the Channel Islands, or this ME community now around the world, the number of people in far-flung countries, it's wonderful that we can do that. So there's never been a better time to be ill, is what I say. And having the technology around it to be able to link up with people is wonderful.
And you mentioned there, getting married soon as well, and your plans there. How does ME affect making plans in the future, and what you're going to do, and what you feel you want to do but fear that you can't do?
I've learned so much about this over the last year. The difficulty is what I've learned I also regularly forget, which is actually why writing it down on my blogs has been helpful, to go back and read my own advice and be my own teacher and think, oh yeah, Gary, listen to your own advice. Don't just dole it out to other people. Making too many plans into the future, I've found, is problematic because if you see them in your diary, I find myself worrying about whether I'm going to let someone down, starting to feel overwhelmed that I've taken too much on, and not having anything in the diary then feels, oh, it's miserable. What's the point of this life? I'm not seeing another human being in the next week. So there's a balance, and I'm trying to find that balance by having one thing a day. That thing might be a cup of coffee with a friend. Tomorrow, the thing in my diary is a visit to the chiropractor that I found very helpful when my nerve system has become inflamed. I find a chiropractor who really understands how they can help that. So that's in my diary. But yeah, with a wedding, meeting suppliers, planning for the big day, knowing that friends, family, relatives are arriving a few days before the wedding, the obligation to see all of them. It's tough. It's a work in progress, but I know I have to be really strict on myself. And I also have to remember that those close to me, those who know me and love me, are infinitely forgiving. So as much as their expectation might be that we're all going to see each other the day before the wedding and maybe go out for dinner the night before, I desperately want to. I absolutely intend not to, because that 24, 48 hours before, I'm just going to hold myself up in a corner and do nothing. Yeah, no noise, no light, no sounds, because it all drains. And I want to be on full form with a bit of adrenaline and Prosecco on the big day, of course, for fuel. But I want to be on full form on my wedding day because, as I jokingly say, you only get a first wedding once, don't you?
But you do. That's so true. That's so true. And in terms of, because you're talking there about the support that you do get from family and friends and on how to manage Emmy and yourself as well. What about sort of medically as well? Do you what happens there once you've had the diagnosis? You said there's nothing to kind of treat it. So
no.
So what happens with the support there?
Well, the NICE guidelines, that's the National Institute for Clinical and Health Excellence in the UK that produces the NHS guidelines that Jersey and Guernsey tend to follow as best practice, are incredibly controversial. There was a trial called PACE that was set up in 2011 that recommended something called graded exercise therapy, which was basically getting people with ME to do more and a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. Well, I know from my own experience, and tens, hundreds of thousands of people now know, that is actually incredibly harmful. And it's still the official policy. Only last week there was a debate in Westminster about the harm that graded exercise therapy and the PACE trial has caused, and NICE are currently reviewing their guidelines. They won't be reviewed until October 2020. I'm not expecting the world will change in October 2020, but it's the start of an acknowledgement of the harm that's been done for a lot of people. I have to say, for some people with very mild symptoms, it may work for them. Everybody is different, but to have this as a cast iron policy is harmful. So for me currently, I see an endocrinologist every 3 months.
What do they do?
That's a great question.
Well, I was going to say,
yeah,
because it's one of those.
I see someone with a very big job title every 3 months. What do they do? The endocrine system is all linked to your body's hormonal balances and how your pituitary and other glands within your body talk to each other and pump stuff around your system. I can almost hear anyone who's an expert in endocrinology screaming at the radio for that description. Go look it up on a search engine. But it's to do with that stuff in your body and how your body talks to itself and how that machine operates to keep you in balance. And I'm not in balance at the moment because things aren't firing correctly. So I'm on a cocktail of supplements and minerals, vitamins, vitamin D, calcium. I'm on iron supplements. I have prebiotics, probiotics to improve my gut health. I have vitamin B12 shots every 6 to 8 weeks that I think actually do lift my energy a little bit. It doesn't last for long though, and as much as I'd like them more frequently, it quite hurts, that injection, so I'm quite happy to leave it every 6 to 8 weeks. I'm on all of those things. I'm having regular blood tests. My testosterone levels are at the very low end of normal. We've tried testosterone replacement. It's not had any noticeable impact on me because I'm so butch to begin with, Christina. And they're probably going to try that again as well. There's a feeling they want to try that again. But the endocrinologist again keeps coming back to this kindness. In the absence of the science, that the kindness is key, which involves, I mean, it's stuff that you might call mindfulness. It's a bit of a buzzword around at the moment, but I've found great joy and comfort in standing on the beach, taking my shoes off, having just the edge of the tide lapping my feet, and just listening, just stillness, listening and being in the present, because that worry and guilt I spoke about earlier, it really rears its ugly head. It is energy sapping, and worry, as I tell other people, is literally a waste of energy. You are worrying about something that's not yet happened. If it hasn't yet happened, why are you worrying about it? Because it doesn't exist. And if you only have a small amount of energy and you're expending your energy on worry, you're an idiot. So I am regularly an idiot, and I'm trying to tell myself that as well. So worry less, be more Teflon, be more non-stick, and just breathe in the day. I try and sit in the morning. We don't have a garden. We live in a second floor flat, but I try and sit and look through the lounge window and open the window. And just as the day is dawning, because I tend to be up very early, listening to the bird song And then noticing the early morning traffic, maybe the bin lorry, maybe the vans delivering the newspapers. Although if they could deliver the newspaper earlier to my local newsagent, that'd be great, because it's a bit late for my liking. Listening to the day waking up, and it just keeps you in the here and now. And I find that very helpful, because the stress response on my body, that stress response as journalists we thrive on, I used to thrive on, now causes me immense physical pain and starts shutting my body down. My eyesight begins to go, my vision begins to blur. It's like someone's rubbed Vaseline on my eyes, and my body begins to shut down. So I don't want to do that. But as I say, it's learning a whole new lifestyle, because that's not my instinct. My instinct is to be doing everything now at 100 miles an hour, because I love that kind of stuff. But it's time to slow down.
Well, you're listening to BBC Radio Jersey. Also listening to TV journalist Gary Burgess there, talking about ME, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, and how he's coping with that. We'll be back as well to hear some more after the OJs. And here with me in the studio, looking out the window with me at the moment, TV journalist Gary Burgess. We've been talking about ME, talking about you and ME as well. And you also spoke about the response that you've had as well since you started talking about it. I know you were saying at ITV where you work, you've done a piece there, you've been on BBC Radio 5 Live, you're here now on social media as well. I mean, how does that make you feel, knowing that in a way there are lots of other people who are going through similar situations?
It's mixed feelings, actually. I've found myself on a number of occasions. First of all, it's heartening to know you're not alone. It's heartening to get feedback from people, whether that feedback is good, bad or ugly, and it's 99% wonderful feedback, to know that people either empathise with your situation or appreciate you trying to raise awareness of ME. But then there are regularly moments where I found myself crying reading messages from people. I keep coming back to this scandal word. There will be a day when we look at how people have been treated. And I'm not talking for years, I'm talking for decades. There are people who've been in touch with me who are locked in their own homes in this very small space, and imagine what that is like for somebody who doesn't have that support network around them, and doesn't have that voice, and doesn't have that outlet for all the things that makes life joyful and colourful and vibrant and joyous. And interestingly, only in the past few days, and it's something, I mean, there are so many things on my shopping list that I want to explore and try and raise awareness of, but one in particular is the number of children with ME, and how the system isn't really there to manage their needs, and how they're very often pointed towards the nearest CAMS service, the Child Adolescent Mental Health Service, for a condition that's not a mental health condition, and how parents have had their children taken away from them because the parents are seen as the ones who are causing this harm on their child because of an ignorance, a lack of understanding. And then the hardship of those very parents who are then becoming full-time carers of these children who should be enjoying the best times of their lives, but aren't, because of this lack of awareness, of knowledge, of understanding, of connecting the dots. You know, I suspect if governments and health services and policymakers and medics and researchers and scientists were grown up enough to park all of their vested interests and get in a room and share their knowledge with each other, we'd make at least 50% of the progress needed in a day. I also know that's not how the world works. So, you know, I'm doing my bit, other people are doing their bit. And there are some people who are very frustrated by what I'm doing, because I'm sometimes misusing words, because I'm new to this. You know, this has been, you know, a year and a bit of my life, only a few months since a formal diagnosis. And some people who have got decades of a head start on me, and there are people who've got in touch saying, you don't realise, you don't understand, you've said this, you've said that. So I'm learning along the way, and I completely understand their frustration and their response as well, because if you put yourself in their shoes, or not even shoes, they're stuck in bed, put them in their bed, put yourself in their bed. What is life like? You know, it is absolutely horrible. So in the grand scheme of things, in terms of people with ME, I'm lucky on so many fronts. I've got a loving fiance, I've got a roof over my head, I've got an employer who has been absolutely wonderful, and I've also got symptoms that mean with a lot of rest and planning and organisation, I can do things like this today, which is a real privilege to be able to do. And even if it helps one person or makes someone in a position of influence wake up to the fact that they are in a position of influence to then affect some kind of change at policy level, great, I'll take that. I don't want to change the world, but if I can nudge it a little bit in the right direction, fabulous.
Well, thank you for coming in and speaking to us today. And, people do want to sort of find out a little bit more. It might be someone's listening and they, what you're describing is what they're going through as well. Or maybe they just want to know more about the condition as well. How can they do that?
Well, I've set up, as I say, it began as a blog and it's now growing into something a bit more sprawling. I've called it Zonked Club, Zonked, Zonked Club. If you search that on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, and in a search engine, you will find a website, you will find blog posts, you will find videos, and inside there I've got links to the specialists. I'm not a specialist, I'm not an expert, I'm just somebody with it trying to make the best of a bad situation. But within there, the signposting to a world of information. And I've also found, particularly on Facebook actually, there are lots of groups, global groups of people in a similar situation, and I found that a huge comfort. I've not found any great revelation, there's no magic bullet I've found, but I found guidance, reassurance, really that confidence that I'm heading in the right direction when it comes to eating better or resting more or letting go of worries. But yeah, Zonk Club, if I can be really selfish at this point, is where I've put all of that together, and I've had a lot of people making contact with me in the past few days and weeks, and it means the world. And I will respond eventually to every single one. I'm ploughing through them, but I'm rationing myself to an hour a day because I know if I do any more, it would be counterproductive.
Well, thanks for coming in. Just finally, though, before you do go, for anyone who's listening and thinking how dynamic you sound and how full of energy you sound, because you do.
Yeah.
What would you say about, just coming in today? And
I'd say that's one of the hardest things about ME, and it's no one else's fault. I completely understand why other people don't quite understand it. I probably look fine. What I would say right now is my wrists feel like they're in a clamp. My ankles feel wobbly. In fact, my legs felt wobbly as I was heading in here today. My eyesight's beginning to go at the edge of my field of vision. My neck and shoulders are in absolute agony, and I know straight after this I'm going to lie down in bed. But I'm not here for a pity party, by the way. But what is frustrating for so many people, including me, is the fact that it's a hidden disability. It's something I didn't really think about a year or two ago. I didn't think about hidden disabilities, but you'll see me walking down the street. I may look absolutely fine. Other days I may look absolutely knackered, but it's still the same person. I'm still me. I've still got the sparkle in my eye, and I'm still trying to make the best of what I can do because I have that determination. And you don't see the other side of it because I don't invite strangers into my house to look at me lying silently in bed feeling sorry for myself, which I try not to do too often because I try to stay optimistic. But that's what I'd say to people who hear this on the radio. And I've had messages from people going, you're a hypochondriac, you're making it up. I've seen your YouTube videos, you're waving your arms around, so clearly you're a fake, you're a fraud. I mean, these messages come from people which are deeply hurtful, but I can also understand why some people would think that. But I go back to what I said earlier about my non-stick frying pan. I'm letting it slide off me. I don't care. Think what you like.
Well, thank you.
In a nice way. Sorry, I should say. I didn't want to leave it like that. That sounded horribly rude. Think what you like in a nice way.
In a nice way. Well, Gary, thanks for coming in today.
Oh, thank you. It really is
all
kind of
the
you.
Best for all the wedding plans as well.
Yeah, 4 weeks and counting. Dum, dum, dum. Or should that be dum, dum, da, dum?
It should be, I think. So thank you very much. Gary Burgess there.